Hello there guys, this is Christy Lewis from Dostoevsky in Space. Today I'm going to give you a brief review and a going through all my notes type video of Midnight Sun by Stephanie Meyer. This is Twilight from Edward's perspective. So I did post a very brief review on Goodreads that kind of tells you my general thoughts about it. So I'll just pull that up so that you can see that. And basically what I said was I enjoyed it so much, and I enjoyed it for the reason that it really fills out a lot of parts of Edward's perspective that's more interesting than Bella's in a lot of ways, and fills in a lot of the blank space. And it was really a treat to get some, it was a treasure. She was giving us treasures for the real fans of Twilight. So this I would have killed for this as a teenager. I really loved this series as a teenager. I just loved living in it. It was so emo and just so fun. And I just reread the whole series with, one of my booktube besties here, Victoria. And she enjoyed it so much as well. And she said when she was reviewing it on her channel that if you like romantasy but you haven't read this yet, give the series a try for sure. She hasn't read Midnight Sun yet, so but she gave me this for Christmas, and I read it in the Dominican Republic when we were on vacation. We just sat on the beach and read all day. It was perfect for that. So yeah, that was basically my review. Some parts of it feel a little bit forced, and you'll hear those parts in here. And I think a lot of it is because Stephanie Meyer, she's responding with Edward's thoughts to what reviewers have said about Edward and Bella. Our first note here is on, I fought back the frown that would give her lie away. We had to stick together, Alice and I. It wasn't easy, being the freaks among those who were already freaks. We protected each other's secrets. So this is Edward and Alice in the school lunchroom at their high school in Forks, Washington. And Edward, this is so interesting because he can read everybody's thoughts. That's Edward's super vampire power. And he's talking about Alice and him being the freaks of the family because Alice can see the future. And so they have these mental abilities that set them apart from all the other vampires who have their own powers, but they are like the mental freaks as he terms himself and herself. So it's really, from reading the Twilight perspective that Edward can read everybody's thoughts, but actually feeling the reality of that in this book, it came through really strongly. And I thought that Stephanie Meyer really thought things through pretty well. Whereas things that he was thinking about other people or like generalizing about other people, like it felt like right on. So well imagined. That's what I wrote. Let's move on to the next quote, which is, unlike Carlisle, Tanya and her sisters had discovered their consciences slowly. In the end, it was their fondness for human men that turned them against the slaughter. Now the men they loved lived. So I thought this was so interesting, getting to hear who the Denali vampire clan is. In the original books, there's a group of ally vampires in Alaska that are friends with the Cullens, and the thing that they have in common is that they do not drink human blood. They are vegetarian vampires, so they live off of animal blood. So that's why they call themselves vegetarian vampires, even though they're not. They're still eating animals, so they're not vegetarian, but they're not eating humans, which is like the most fulfilling blood for vampires to drink. I loved getting to know a little bit about the Denali vampires in this book, a little bit more about them. I could not guess at her meaning or the source behind her pique. I was entirely lost. So this is Edward talking about why he's so intrigued by Bella, because he can hear everybody else's thoughts, but he can't hear Bella's thoughts. So she keeps him guessing all the time. She doesn't react the way everybody else reacts to things. So in the beginning, he's just like, this is so interesting. This is before he has smelled her and ruined his life by tempting him. So for Edward, Bella is what's called a blood singer, which means her blood sings to him most strongly out of all humans. So she really tempted him to break his oath of not drinking human blood and instead drinking animal blood. She almost tempted him out of that. So, yeah. So what I wrote was, she confuses him and he enjoys her unexpectedness. Like me with Dostoevsky, the novelty. Yeah, so I love Dostoevsky because he does keep me guessing. Every time I read him, it's like something novel, every line. I can never keep track. Half the time I don't know what's going on and I just love it. It's keeps me guessing so much. And there's a lot of aha moments where suddenly I will understand. But anyways, but every second I spent with her was a mistake, a risk she shouldn't have to take. So I just felt like this book filled out Edward's character so well. There's so many moments where he's just like downright unpleasant. He's so stiff. And you're kind of getting a sense of why and understanding him more with this book from his perspective. So in this case, he's feeling extremely conflicted hanging out with Bella because he feels like it's a mistake for both of them. And he is putting her life at risk by just being around her. And only he really knows the intensity of the risk that he's putting her at. Nobody else understands that. And so when you're looking at it in the first book, you're kind of like, man, he is like so intense and standoffish and weird. But this is why. It's because he has a lot of anxiety, which we will get to. I feel like Stephanie Meyer is she portrays anxiety incredibly well. Smiling a certain smile that never surfaced for her content. Oh, so she's describing Bella here. And it was so interesting because these descriptions of Bella were not in the original. Bella doesn't necessarily come off as a super nice person in the original, but he notices all the nice things about Bella. And that was nice to read. It was like, oh, so he's really, I mean, Bella is a more complex character than sometimes people give her credit for. Ugh. I need my blanket. It's freezing here. So the things that he noticed: she smiles a certain smile that never surfaced for her contented friends. It's for people who need encouragement, basically. She will smile for them. And yeah, that's like the mainly thing. She only would reveal this smile to someone who was hurting to encourage them. So I thought, oh, that's sweet. I mean, he's really in love. Like, he really notices every little thing. Okay, this next quote is, I could not hope to compete against the human boys, whether these specific boys appealed to her or not. I was the villain, the nightmare. How could she see me as anything else? If she knew the truth about me, it would frighten her and repulse her. So it's interesting because I don't know that necessarily I would describe Edward as having like a generalized anxiety disorder, but he definitely has anxiety when it comes to Bella. Like, there's one source that he worries about all the time, and it's Bella. And it just reminds me a lot of my husband, who doesn't have generalized anxiety disorder. I actually do. But anything regarding me and my health, he worries about like over time in his brain. And it just is like, yeah, that sounds that is Edward to a T. He just has so much anxiety over this one subject. And he's an overthinker, just like Kevin in regards to my health. I waited for her response, torn in two, wishing she would finally hear and understand, thinking I might die if she did. How melodramatic. So this is Edward thinking. He's kind of hoping that Bella will realize her danger and walk away from him, but she doesn't seem to be doing that. So it really, though, explains why he kept warning her in the first book and in the first movie. He kept saying these really annoying warnings to her that were like obviously not going to work because they're not specific enough. You know, it's just like, your life is in danger whenever you're around me. Or, you know, I'm the bad guy. It's just like, okay, these warnings aren't really working. But now we know why he was giving them. It's because he was so divided about the fact that just being in his very presence, she is in danger. It really just comes through very strongly in this book. Okay, next. What if I'm not a superhero? What if I'm the bad guy? That's a famous line from the first book and the movie as well. She's irresponsible and slightly eccentric, and she's a very unpredictable cook. She's my best friend. Her voice had turned melancholy. So this is Bella talking about her mother and how they're best friends. And it was really nice because you could tell that Bella and her mom had you could tell that there was a lot of relationship like moments there because they had a very specific dynamic between the two of them that no other characters in the books had. But it was a little bit hard to read into it, but Bella spells it out here a little bit better. Like, she loves that her mom is irresponsible and eccentric and adventure seeking. You know, those are things that she loves about her mom. Okay. This clarified things for me. It was easy to understand how the irresponsibility of the mother would result in the maturity of the daughter. She had to grow up early to become the caretaker. So that was Edward's take on the Bella and her mom dynamic. It was comforting to think that I wouldn't have to puzzle over any of these small mysteries forever. We were friends now, or at least trying to be friends. I could ask her about her weekend, about the beach, and whatever late night activity had made her look so weary. So, yeah. Edward basically is following Bella everywhere she goes and watching her. He's stalking her. And because he can't read her thoughts the way he can read everybody else's thoughts, that really bothers him. He wants to know why she acts a certain way that's like different from everybody else. And now that they actually have like a friendship sort of happening, he's like, oh, well, good. At least now I can ask her. So creepy and also cute. I was wrong. You're much more observant than I gave you credit for. Okay, this is a line that this sticks out, I think, to a lot of readers when they originally read Twilight. And this is what I mean when I say Stephanie Meyer was talking to her detractors and negative reviewers with Edward's thoughts in this book. She was like, everybody thinks that Edward is so condescending to Bella, just like everybody thinks Edward is so controlling of Bella, which is, I think, why she really like focuses on conveying his anxiety about her. He comes off as controlling because he's very anxious and he wants to make sure that she doesn't hurt herself, which she has a propensity to do. So, and then in this case, he sounds super condescending to her and saying that, oh man, you're a little more observant than, I gave you credit for. So I just feel like the way she is like, she has read her reviewers and she knows what they are saying about Edward because this is a direct response to them. But this is a really awkward moment for me still, where she tries to like soften it by the next line. And though she might not realize it, I'd given her plenty of credit already. So he says the words, I was wrong. You're much more observant than I gave you credit for. And then he thinks the words, and though she might not realize it, I'd given her plenty of credit already. So she's like taking the original script that people objected to and then adding his thoughts to it to kind of soften the blow. It's not that he thinks she's not smart. It's just, she's even smarter than he thought that she was. It's like, okay, we'll see. I don't know. The thing is, though, he really does change. He does like a complete 180 on a lot of this stuff. So yeah, and I think it really does portray how relationships grow together. If the two humans are focusing on growth and becoming better people and loving each other better, this is how it's supposed to work. One side has a flaw that the other says, I can't handle this. And they communicate about it, and then it changes slowly. You know, that's like how marriage works. And these two aren't married yet, but I'm just saying that that is accurate. That is how it works. Every word we spoke here, each one of them was another pomegranate seed. So this is referring to the cover. There's a pomegranate on the cover, and the whole thing with the pomegranate is Persephone was a like grain related goddess, agriculture related goddess, and she was kidnapped by Hades and became his bride and brought to the underworld where she became queen. But Zeus sent Hermes to fetch her back because all the crops were failing, and so they needed their agriculture goddess back. And she couldn't come back to the surface because she had already eaten the pomegranate seeds that Hades had fed her. So it's kind of like fairy. Don't eat any food in fairy or you'll be trapped and you won't be able to go back to the real world. That is the reference here, because once Bella becomes a vampire, she will not be able to go back. And that's a huge theme throughout the series. Oops, excuse me. Where Bella wants to become a vampire and Edward does not want her to, because he's like, you're so young. You don't know what you want yet. You don't know what you're giving up. You don't know what things about humanity that you will wish in the future that you could have back. Immortality is not all it's cracked up to be. Do you want to ride with me today? I asked. Unlike dinner last night, I would let her choose. But from now on, it must always be her choice. So this is another case where Stephanie Meyer is talking directly to her critical reviewers. So he's trying, in his thoughts, trying to change his behavior to something that would be more acceptable to these reviewers. So I don't know if that was really successful or not with people. I kind of don't think that her super negative reviewers were like, yeah, I'm going to go pick up Midnight Sun. But it was still really interesting for me to go back and read this. Okay, next. Oh no, it just fell. But yeah, that one just fell. It's bad. I don't know where that was from. So my book got super saturated. It was very humid when we were in the DR. So this book is like absolutely falling apart. I don't know if you can tell. Like, I tried to like tape it together and it's holding, but yeah, things are just falling off, including my flags. Oh, so this is Bella describing Arizona and why she loves it, which was fun. Hearing her like rhapsodize about the beauty. And then the sunsets are incredible, she continued, switching subjects abruptly. Seriously, you'll never see anything close here. Even in the middle of the day, though, the sky, that's the main thing. It's not blue like the sky here, when you can even see it here. It's brighter, paler. Sometimes it's almost white, and it's everywhere. So what I wrote here was Bella seems like a much happier person in this book than she did when we were reading from her perspective. I think, though, that's her internal monologue isn't always pleasant, just like a lot of our internal monologue isn't pleasant. But we have to be gentle with ourselves, right? But seeing her from Edward's perspective, she seems like a lot happier and a nicer of a person than she did in the first book. You can't avoid it, Edward. You're going to have to face it. Knowing it could easily go either way, you still have to face it. So this is Edward and Alice talking about a vision that Alice saw of Edward killing Bella. And yeah, I had never really considered how Alice's visions playing in his head and worrying about those visions would have stoked his anxiety about Bella's safety. So he was really going through a lot in the first book that we didn't see because we're only seeing it from Bella's perspective. So his internal anxiety is really intense because Alice has seen a future where he has killed Bella. He has drank her blood. And so she's telling him here, you have to go to this place and you have to choose not to do it. That's the only way to make the vision go away and stop plaguing us. And once you make that decision, that's like the pivotal one. If you make the right decision there, that future will disappear. The bad future will disappear and you will not actually kill her. So yeah, he's going to have to face his fear and anxiety. So then there was a chapter that was interesting about Edward and Carlisle's history together. How Carlisle found Edward, which we know a little bit about in Twilight, but then how he transformed Edward and the training that Edward had to go through in order to become safe to be around humans. And he also about Edward's rebellion against Carlisle's way of life, you know, where Carlisle was trying to help him develop this like abstinence from drinking human blood, and Edward questions it. He has this adolescent phase where he questions it and ends up drinking human blood. He tracks down murderers with his ability to read thoughts, and he drinks their blood. And so he was given this idea because he read thoughts of one of Carlisle's companions, like friends, who does not subscribe to his worldview. She actually does drink human blood. And Edward read her thoughts, and she said basically that it's drinking human blood is the greatest joy that life can give, basically. And so that made Edward really curious. Like, what am I missing out on by not drinking human blood? Is that like the whole, like, what am I missing out on? He was really curious why she thought that that was the best thing in life. But then he talks about after trying it out, he's like, I was never sure why blood wasn't the existence crowning ecstasy that Siobhan had believed it to be. Why I continued to miss Carlisle and Esme more than I enjoyed my freedom. Why the weight of each kill seemed to accumulate until I was crippled under their combined load. I came to the conclusion that Siobhan might not know anything greater than the call of blood, but I had been born to something better. So, and basically he's saying here that he misses the fellowship of Carlisle and Esme so much that he's willing to give up human blood in order to get that back. He misses the relationship with them more than he enjoys drinking human blood. So he's saying maybe Siobhan just hasn't experienced what I have, basically, that is better than drinking human blood. And then next, he says, I have no doubts. I now knew the meaning of the phrase, the greatest joy of this life. The greatest joy of my life was this fragile, warm, brave, insightful girl sleeping so peacefully nearby, Bella, the very greatest joy that life had to offer me, and the greatest pain when she was lost. So this is really, this was incredible because it makes you think like he never would have known the whole purpose of his life, which is what he's saying here. Bella is the purpose of his life. He never would have even known her if he didn't have the discipline of like 80 years to help him overcome the blood singer element, where he was so tempted to drink her blood. If he had just done it, he never would have known the purpose of his life because he wouldn't have had time to fall in love with Bella. So yeah. Yeah. And it just made me think Emmett, whenever he ran into a blood singer, he just killed them. You know, I was like, what if Emmett killed his whole reason for existing? Like, that's too bad. But, you know, God knows our weaknesses and probably knew not to make that Emmett's whole point in life. Like he did with Edward. I had to get my anxiety under control. See, I did not remember Edward ever talking about having anxiety in the original series. That just wasn't really something that came up. But in this book, he actually does talk about having anxiety. It probably felt safe or safe enough because I knew this wasn't the place. Oh, so this is where Edward is taking Bella to the site where Alice had the vision of Edward killing Bella. They are going to the meadow where he's going to show Edward that he sparkles in the sun. So he wasn't nervous until they actually got to the meadow, which was interesting. But yeah, so what I talked about here was like, oh yeah, it was Alice's vision that was what's making him so tense and unlikable. Because he was so worried about the vision, and that's why he was so like unlikable at times. And then, okay, so Bella said something. It's a lot of pressure, presents and stuff. What if you don't like them? You've got to get your game face on right away so you don't hurt anyone's feelings. And people look at you a lot. So she's talking about opening presents and how uncomfortable it is. It's like, word, it is so uncomfortable. What if you disappoint? That happened to me once where I was opening a present and I was like really confused about what it was. And the person was like, you don't like it. And they were upset. And I was like, I don't know what it is. I just don't know how to react. What the heck is this thing? I mean, she already had me, right? One huge life-altering anchor was enough. She wasn't going to volunteer for more. So this was Bella talking about Renee, how Renee viewed Bella. Yeah. Well, I don't remember what it was that she was talking. Oh, dogs. She was talking about why they never had pets growing up, Bella and Renee. See, there were so many conversations where, like, in the original book, it just says that Edward asks Bella questions all day, and we hear, like, a couple of them, like, what's your favorite color? And stuff like that. But there's a lot of other questions that he actually asks her during that time that we don't hear about in the original book that we hear about in Midnight Sun, and it's so much fun. It's interesting hearing about Bella's backstory with her mom and stuff like that. Like, it's just fun to hear more of her answers to those questions. Said, I am loving the details she expands on in this book. From Edward's point of view, we are getting to know Bella better because Edward doesn't know all of this, so he's asking. Versus, like, when we're reading from Bella's point of view, she already knows all the stuff about her life. It's not like she needs to rethink all of this stuff, but Edward doesn't already know all of this stuff, so we learn it from his perspective. She half smiled, not repulsed. You should be. So I just remember all these rebuffs that Edward did. So this is like probably a little over halfway through now, Midnight Sun. So there's so much in the beginning that we don't get from Bella's perspective, where Edward is like going back and forth in his head about pros and cons. Like, it's actually ruined his life. Bella coming into it has ruined his life. Like, it's the most disruptive thing he has ever experienced since becoming a vampire. And he rebuffs her all the time because he's having all of these anxieties and he's coming off as like really unlikable and tense. And that's why. So, and this is, I wrote, Bella must be pretty self-confident to stand all of Edward's anxiety rebuffs, basically. She must be like really sure of what she wants. I don't know if I could handle that. If me personally, if somebody continually said stuff to me like what Edward says to Bella, I don't think I would probably befriend them because they don't come off as receptive to me, but Bella was like doing it anyway. It doesn't matter. Every other part of me, I imprisoned into rigid immobility. But the thing about Edward is he does have like a really iron self-control, which is something I admire. It makes me want to like learn how to meditate because I feel like I would have better self-control if I learned how to meditate. The imaginary weight of her gaze, now that I knew it was admiring, that she found me beautiful regardless of everything, brought back that electric current that I felt with her in the dark. An imitation of life running through my veins. So, yeah, this is another early source of misunderstandings. He's used to being frightened frightening to other people. He's used to other people being frightened of him. He's not used to them, like, admiring him, which to me is a bit of a stretch. Like, come on, Edward, you know that you're handsome and attractive. Come on now. Don't give me that. And then another moment that I appreciated that we get in Midnight Sun is Edward talks about the pleasure that he feels. Like, he says, you can't even imagine how that feels when Bella touches his skin for like the first time when she did that, because his skin is really cold and hers is really like human temperature. And he just says, oh yeah, that feels like really nice. Like, your skin on mine feels really nice. And you're like, okay, I guess I can't imagine it because you just said I can't imagine it. But here she imagines it for us. It says, her skin felt fever hot against mine. And though a tremor quivered in her fingers, there was no fear in that touch. I was just like, so yeah, he describes the electric current again that he feels. It felt like an earthquake rocking through my core. So I was like, thank you for describing that, Stephanie Meyer. I appreciated that you told us what that felt like. There was no hint in my mind or body now, no sense that the monster was lurking so near the surface, that I could snap so easily. It made me want to shriek and tear trees out by their roots. If I couldn't feel the edge, couldn't see the trigger, how could I ever protect her from myself? That's how I feel about my health problems. Yeah, that's what I wrote. That's how I feel about my health problems. Meyer is such a talented writer. Her interiority, like, she really gets anxiety. There's no hint in his mind that easily what could be happening here is he ends up snapping and killing her. And he said, I felt normal. What normal had become in these last months, at least. In control. Just exactly the same as before, when my confidence had nearly killed her. So that's the line. What I feel just like I did before when I almost killed her. So that's the way anxiety feels. Like, even if things feel like they're going okay, it's like, but if one thing changed even a little bit that I could do, it could result in the worst possible thing happening. And so that's what he's afraid of course. That is totally what anxiety feels like. So I tried to settle myself. I needed to accept that through some miracle, Bella was able to know the darkest things about me and not be terror-stricken, able to not hate me for it. If she was strong enough to hear this, I needed to be strong enough to speak the words. I looked back at the sun, feeling the adrenaline in its slow descent. So, what I wrote was, this is how I feel about my friends who stand in the gap, and Kevin. I also do this. Kevin and I also do this. Forgiving each other again and again. Trust is very slow to develop. So yeah, friends that I've developed enough trust with to share my worst things about myself, it's like a very special, slow to develop thing that he's describing here. And in this case, they have known each other for months, so I guess it is slow developing. But the fragrance coming off your skin, I thought it would make me deranged that first day. In that 1 hour, I thought of 100 different ways to lure you from the room with me, to get you alone, and I fought them each back, thinking of my family, what I could do to them. I had to run out, to get away before I could speak the words that would make you follow. You would have come. So he's describing why he just ran out of the room that day, the first day when they're in biology together, in close quarters for the first time, and he smells her for the first time. And my comment was, why didn't he just feign illness and leave? If you thought of 100 ways to kill her, couldn't you think of that one way to get you out of class? Just pretend you're like about to throw up and run away. I don't know. Apparently he didn't think of that. That's what I would have done. I also saw very clearly in that moment that there was no separate monster and never had been. Eager to disconnect my mind from my desires, I had, as was my habit, personified that hated part of myself to distance it from the parts that I considered me, just as I had created the harpy to give myself someone to fight. It was a coping mechanism, and not a very good one. Better to see myself as the whole, bad and good, and work with the reality of it. So he's coming to a better understanding of himself, realizing that the monster who wants to kill humans and drink their blood is actually part of himself. So there's the good things that he likes about himself and the bad things, and it's all the same person. And Bella is what is prompting this revelation for him. So I wrote, my comment here was that I get why feminists hate the "you complete me" or "man improves woman" trope in literature, because it has been abused. However, loving another person and receiving their love in return actually is a life-changing thing, and it will change your character completely. You just kind of have to accept that when you're in a relationship with somebody, like a really deep relationship with them, you are going to change, and you're going to see some things about yourself that you don't like, and you're going to have to change for the better. I want to hear more about you. Well, not as interesting for me, but she could have whatever she wanted. Ask me anything. So this is a conversation where Bella is like, you've been asking me so many questions. Now I want to ask you questions and hear about you. And he's like, anything you want. Like, things changed so much after the Meadow incident because he suddenly wasn't worried about killing her anymore. That's why he was the way he was so early on in the book. It's because he was like really afraid of just snapping and murdering her. And now that that fear is gone, Alice sees no future where he kills her. He's like totally in control now and sure of himself. And so now he's like just happy, just enjoying being with Bella and being in love. That's a good question, and you're not the first one to ask it. What question was it? Why do you do it? Okay, anyways. You're not the first one to ask it. The others, the majority of our kind... Oh, she's asking him why he's a vegetarian vampire. The majority of our kind, who are quite content with our lot, they too wonder at how we live. But you see, just because we've been dealt a certain hand, it doesn't mean that we can't choose to rise above, to conquer the boundaries of a destiny that none of us wanted. I just love this because we can rise above our faults to some degree, and that is a narrative that's maybe not super popular right now, but you actually can do that. You know, I have faults for sure, but sometimes I have to rise above them for the sake of family, for the sake of work, for the sake of friends, making friends. Again, I do have social anxiety, but I try to overcome that. I do live streams with people now, and I don't even really get nervous for them. Like, you know, you can overcome these flaws about yourself to some degree, and just like Edward is. So I love that. Like, there's like so much depth in here. I just really love that. I'm sorry, I didn't mean that to sound cruel. I can't watch her do this. She's got a chance for everything, Edward, Rosalie whispered. A whole life of possibilities ahead of her, and she's going to waste it all. Everything I lost. I can't bear to watch. So Rosalie is actually humanized in this book. There's some funny stuff that happens, like when we really find out why Rosalie is mad about Bella and Edward. Part of it is because she can't believe that Bella tempts Edward when she herself, the perfect goddess of human beauty, did not tempt Edward even at all. Like, Edward was never like, I want to marry Rosalie, but he was like instantly in love with Bella, and she's like, why is she so special? She was jealous. And Edward you don't know that really in the original series, because Edward promises Rosalie that he won't tell anybody. So that was funny. But this instance actually makes sense and humanizes her as well, where Rosalie really wishes that her body could still like the only thing that she ever wanted was to have a happy human life and babies. So she really regrets not being able to have a baby. So Rosalie is like, I can't believe she's giving that up. Bella is giving up everything that I want. You knew that already, she whispered. The heat of her breath sat... So this is where Bella and Edward overheard a conversation where Bella told somebody that she loved him, I think is what's happening here. And he's like, you said you loved me. Like, that's the first time he's heard it. And she's like, you already knew that. But he says, it was nice to hear just the same. I love you. So just a sweet moment where they're actually finally saying, I love you. So it does sometimes feel like very quick that they fell in love. But from Edward's point of view, it kind of made sense. Like, he literally had to overhaul his entire life to be around her. So it was a very deliberate choice. And he did not sleep in any of the time, that Bella is sleeping and not knowing what's going on and just totally in the dark. So Bella's kind of love for Edward is kind of like, really? You love him? But Edward's love for Bella, I believe that, for him, in order to do what he did, he must actually have really deep, strong feelings for her. Next, would this story be the one that was too much? I scrutinized every minute muscle twitch in her face as I explained. So Bella asks, how old is Carlisle? And so Edward is just waiting for the moment when it's like too much. There's too much differences. It's terrifying between humans and vampires. There's too many. Laurent is a fool. So this was another of the scenes that was really way more interesting from Edward's perspective. I actually listened to like the last 30 something percent of Midnight Sun instead of reading it physically, because I was like, I don't really care about the ending plot of Twilight. It's just not that interesting to me. I don't really think the plotting is really Stephanie Meyer's strength. I think that she's really good at tension building and pacing, but plotting, not in the first book anyways. But this scene was really interesting, the baseball scene in the movie, and in the books, where Edward's family is playing baseball, and then a group of unknown vampires comes by and decides they want to play. And he is seeing inside the heads of these other vampires, and he's seeing that they are split. They're not like one in mind. And that is so interesting. Yeah, so basically the woman, Victoria, who becomes the bad guy for the next 2 books, in her head, she's like cataloging 1,000 different routes for escape. She felt that her best chance was to sprint due north to the Salish Sea, where we couldn't follow her scent. I wondered that she wouldn't opt for the much nearer Pacific coast, but I couldn't see her reasons if she didn't think of them. So this was like, this is interesting, learning about the differences of the mental processes of the different vampires. Like, they felt really different. The different vampires actually felt really different. I glanced at him from the corner of my eye and found myself so incredibly bored. It seemed, so this is Edward glancing over at Jasper, who is a mood maker. So Jasper he's a very convincing and magnetic and charismatic person, and he can change how people are feeling in a room. Like, he can change the atmosphere of a room. And in this case, he's trying to cover himself, and I think Bella as well, and Alice, by covering them with like a layer of boredom, so that like they're just very mundane, nothing to see here, so that people won't even look at them. And that's basically how they are arguing that these other vampires don't notice Bella's scent as a human right away. It's because Jasper is protecting her. So this is Edward discovering what Jasper is doing, because this all happens too quickly for them to like talk about it. I glanced at Jasper. So, because Jasper, he should be like a really obvious threat to these other vampires too. Like, they should notice. This vampire is covered in like scars. And his warlike, he has like this warlike aspect, and they're not even looking at him. And Edward's like, why? How is he escaping their notice? This is why. I glanced at Jasper from the corner of my eye, and I found myself ... so incredibly bored. It seemed as if there could be nothing less interesting in the world than this nondescript vampire standing docilely to one side of our group. Nondescript? Docile? Jasper? Jasper was concentrating so hard that had he been human, his body would have been dripping with sweat. So yeah, he's trying to camouflage them. That was so interesting to me. And then this is another one of my favorite moments in the book, where Edward is seeing things from Laurent's perspective. He is seeing what Laurent thinks of the Cullen family, how he thinks of them as weak for trying to protect this human and not just give in to their instincts to kill humans and like live together docilely, basically. It's specifically one choice. It's because the Cullens hesitated to kill. They didn't just kill these other vampires. Laurent is one of the vampires. So Laurent, James, and Victoria, they're like a threatening presence. And the Cullens outnumbered this coven of 3. And so they could have just killed them. They could have just killed the threat. And Laurent thinks that they're weak for not doing so. But because of Carlisle tonight we had hesitated. We had chosen the more humane route because that was our habit, our way of life. Did that make us ... weaker? I flinched at the thought, but then immediately decided that our choice was still the right one, even if it did make us weak. I could feel that. It resonated deeply in my mind, my being, or my soul, if such a thing existed. Whatever it was that drove this corporeal form. I love this because sometimes the right choice will make you look bad or make you look weak. And sometimes people will misunderstand you, but that doesn't mean it's not the right choice. You can't be so worried about what other people think of you that you go against your conscience. So I just love that strength that Edward is developing of character. Laurent thought us weak. He saw our apparent domesticity as a deficiency. I'd worried the same thing earlier, but not now. Weak was not the impression I planned to leave with James. So yeah, I just worked that because I really loved the chase scenes where Edward and his family are chasing down James, and James is like, they just can travel such distances so quickly, and like they can handle these insane stunts and they don't have to breathe underwater. Like the whole chase sequence was great, but I just listened to it, so I didn't mark any of it down because like I said, I didn't think I would really enjoy the ending as much as I was. But I enjoyed this all the way through. I think I only marked it 4 stars because it was really long, like I said, but I also loved that and would be like thrilled to have New Moon from his perspective. And, you know, I would be thrilled to keep going from his perspective. But the only thing that I think I would criticize is sometimes it feels a little bit forced, his thoughts versus what he actually said in the original series. Sometimes his thoughts will add a layer that's like, that's definitely not the impression I got when I read the original series. The layer of complexity that Stephanie Meyer adds to his thought sometimes isn't very believable, and it just seems like she's just doing this to convince people that Edward is not a bad controlling guy. But anyways, really enjoyed this. I hope you guys enjoyed this video as well. Let me know your thoughts on Midnight Sun down below, and I'll talk to you soon.